This conference will now be recorded.
I didn't think it was very expensive. The packets are always together.
Ready?
Well, and then I printed out, I realized I only printed out the handouts, so I don't know why. Take this down to Highland Grove and see if the sheriff's copy. Yeah.
Good for you.
Way less heat in my kitchen.
Keep your
She needs to be
kitchen away.
What me?
Oh.
I don't go too much. I do some scrambles and stuff like that. Just get enough frustration at work. Great idea.
And Rose, we ready?
Yep.
All righty. Let's come to order. Thank you for attending the North Front Range Transportation Air Quality Planning Council. It's August 1st. We start all our meetings with the Pledge of Allegiance, wherever that flag is.
There's one over there, I see it.
Good enough.
Right outside the window there's a flag.
So right there.
Oh, okay.
Just pretend. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Super. Thank you so much. Let's see. We're going to start out with agenda item number 2. By the way, you'll probably notice there's a change in the agenda format. We didn't volunteer to do that. I understand that organizations such as ourselves are going to have to go to a more accessible agenda style. And so this is our first shot. It may work fine. We may tinker with it, but we're going to go with it for now. So item number 2 on our agenda is public comment. Each public commenter gets 2 minutes each. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to give some? Oh, yes, ma'am. You have the floor.
Thank you very
Civilian.
much. So I'm Suzanne Millett, civilian. I just wanted to take a few minutes because it was sort of chaotic a little earlier, but I just wanted to say thank you to everybody in this room for everything that you have done and for helping me on my path of being the executive director and working in this area. So I really have enjoyed everything. You've really touched me very professionally and personally, and I really appreciate that. You have a great staff, Paul, to pick up and carry on the mission of the NPO. And I just wanted to say thank you to everybody. I really do appreciate it. Thank you, Suzanne.
Thank you, Suzanne. Take care. We'll see you around. All right, item number 3, approval of the minutes. Hopefully we had a chance to take a look at the minutes. They're on page number 10 of the packet. I will entertain a motion to accept them.
Motion to approve, second.
All right, whoever's taking notes.
Gotta be quick here, man.
Yeah. All right, so all in favor, hearing the second, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Good, thank you. All right, so let's move on to the lead planning agency for air quality agenda. Agenda item number 4 is Air Pollution Control Division. That's a written report. You'll find that on page 14 of the packet. Number 5 is North Front Range NPO Air Quality Program. I'm assuming we have Dina on the phone.
That should be
In person.
I've never met her in person.
You may never see her again until someone else does.
This is fantastic. Dina, the floor is yours. If you want to follow along, by the way, it's on page 16 of the pack.
All right, so there were a few air quality issues from July, obviously to be aware of. First and foremost, we want to recognize the fires that are ongoing and the fear and loss that people are dealing with, in addition to the impact to health and air quality that we're all dealing with right now. So I just want to recognize that first. So we've seen many air quality alerts in recent weeks. Before we had our local fires, we were also being impacted by fires from elsewhere, whether it was Canada or other states. So there have been a number of air quality alerts, health alerts that have been issued. And so I just wanted to give you an update between the time I prepared that report to now. We saw higher fourth maximum 8-hour averages. And those are the values that we look at in determination against the ozone max. So we look at the fourth highest 8-hour average. And so we went from, what I had recorded as, our range of 74 to 71 parts per billion to fourth max highs going to 82 to 78 parts per billion. And Rocky Mountain National Park, we saw increase from 68 parts per billion to now 70. So we're seeing it all increase as a result of the impact of the fires. So with that, we've also seen health alert days increase. We went from 30 to 37, and that was, again, just in a week between when I prepared the report to today. So there's a lot going on. A lot of people are dealing with these air quality impacts on top of the other impacts that come along with the fires. All of this is based on initial data and including the flag data. So there's big questions about at some point whether or not that data, any data gets thrown out because it's not representative in any way, shape, or form. I know that's a sensitive issue because, again, we're all breathing that air. So we will track as we go through the summer how that progresses, but as it is, our fourth max values are over the 70 parts per billion, and so that means we're still not meeting the standard. I will say that Colorado has an upcoming attainment date in August 3rd, but that date is based, or that attainment date is based on the 3 years prior data. So that's 21, 22, and 23 data. We already knew with that 23 data that we weren't going to meet the 70 parts per billion. And so Colorado submitted a request to EPA to voluntarily be downgraded to the next more stringent classification for that standard. And so they've done that, and EPA is prepared to move forward and approve that. So we should see that in the Federal Register. What does that mean? That means that under both the older standard of the 75 parts per billion and now under the newer 70 parts per billion, we will be severe under the older standard of 75 and serious under the new standard of 70 parts per billion. What that also means is because we are already a higher classification for the less stringent standard of 75 parts per billion, that we're already applying those requirements that would generally apply, or not generally, but specifically apply in the area. We're already applying those requirements, with the exception of Northern Weld County. And so Northern Weld County is becoming subject to requirements that they have not been subject to in the past, with some of these classifications. So I just want to stop and ask, does anybody have any questions about that?
Countless.
All right.
I'm trying to understand motivation for voluntarily just saying, yeah, we're there. And Why would the state do that? Are there grant opportunities that are available? Does it open us up to the availability of programmatic monies? I'm trying to figure out why that would happen.
I don't want to speak for the state.
Oh, I would.
So I think it might be good to ask them. I should have, and I didn't look at their report, but I know the RAC had reported that out at their ozone modeling forum a couple weeks ago. And so there are, we already know what's going to happen.
Mhm.
And so just embracing that and moving forward, I think there may be some fewer administrative steps that go along with, hey, we already know what's going to happen. We already have requirements in place. So it's just the formal triggering of requirements potentially sooner rather than later. And those requirements are more stringent, and I think those could secure earlier emission reductions that would help us with air quality issues. That would be what I would, I would anticipate would be the response, but again, you probably want to ask the state. Yes.
Johnny?
So a couple questions. So I'm going to start with the easy one. Fires. And we know that we're being hit by these fires and our levels are going up because of the fires. Are we going to be able to, I'm not saying delete them, but will we be punished as a state, since we're above that 70 parts per billion? Are we going to be punished because of the fires in the state of Colorado?
Right now, the data that they have gotten from the monitors includes data that may have been influenced by fires. And when I say may have been, I say that because there is a very rigorous process that you have to go through to demonstrate that we would have not had a problem, but for that wildfire influence. And even before, this last week with the local fires, and perhaps before, I think we had some high values even before we were being impacted by what we visibly saw from the Canadian fires. We still had high values. So there's the data, right now it's flagged, it will be identified, and then decision makers will decide whether or not, it makes a difference if they would go through the process to evaluate whether that data could be excluded from the data that's used to determine whether or not an area was an attainment. But again, we already had high values before the fire.
I understand, but 70 to 72 is different than 70 to 80.
Yep.
Right. I mean, there's a very distinct difference in a few parts per billion in this discussion. Because I will tell you, and this is the next question, even though that we're doing this administratively and we're moving this forward because we know we got to do it, one of the things that I will tell you is going to happen is, or I'm asking, I'm not going to tell you because it's just a gut feeling, is will we start seeing an increased funding that we have to, the state of Colorado, since we're in this higher, well, not severe, but what is it?
Serious?
Serious.
Yeah, God is watching kind of thing. Will we be having to find ways, whether we reduce it or not, but will we have to spend more money or pay the federal government money because we're not meeting those numbers?
Yes, because the more stringent requirements do kick in terms of, things like if you have a new or modified source, the requirement for offsetting the emissions of that new process or that modified process becomes more stringent, what you have to offset. And so that's something usually industry has to work really hard to secure.
Like the reformulated gas, I mean, that's
Yes.
one of the things that we'll have to start using is the reformulated gas, which if I remember right, is a few cents more a gallon than, and that's one of the requirements the state actually tried to get out of, or tried to get waived, and we didn't, I think, weren't successful in doing that.
We've submitted the waiver. EPA has not formally acted on it. They're waiting to see if the concerns that Colorado had expressed come true. So far, they haven't. And so the concerns were fuel shortage or significant cost impacts. And to date, we haven't seen that. And so EPA said very clearly, we're going to sit on that waiver, not formally act on it, and we'll leave it open as long as Colorado wants us to. But yes, going back to what your question, Colorado will have to spend more money, time and effort to look at how they're going to have to meet the new stringent requirements and potentially additional reduction strategies to eventually attain and meet that standard.
Okay, then I'm gonna add on to that. So let's say what North Weld County is running at 68. I don't know what they're running. Let's just say 68. I know they're lower than the 70, the last time they were. Are they gonna have to pay the same, even though they're under their attainment location with their monitor, are they gonna have to pay the same dollars to the state? Or are they gonna put this, like, we all know that the majority of the air pollution in these particulates are coming from more of the metro area than they are from the rural areas. But is everybody in the state gonna be punished the same way with these additional costs?
In the non-attainment area.
There is a non-attainment area.
Yes, so it is a whole non-attainment area. So it just takes one monitor to have 1/4 8-hour average over that 70 parts per billion to trigger. Now, there are areas in other non-attainment areas where they've broken up a non-attainment area eventually because one area consistently attains and another part of it does not. That is something that could be pursued in the future. But I will say, based on the data that we're seeing it all along the Front Range. And so it's not just Weld County or Larimer County or Denver County.
Thank you.
Chris?
Yeah, so my concern is taking into account the air pollution from fires and other sources that are occurring outside of Colorado, outside of the Intermountain West, that with the prevailing winds come in, right, into Colorado, into the Intermountain West. And there appears to be data that supports that. Is that taken into account? I mean, it's really not subtracted. It's like, it's part of the measurement and becomes our problem regionally, even though the base levels are up, not from sources within the state of Colorado or within our non-attainment area. What's the status of the research on that?
So the technical folks at the Air Pollution Control Division, they're looking at the data and they're flagging it as it may be related to a natural event or something out of, our control. So they do flag that data. Now there's a number of steps that they have to go through to decide whether or not they're formally going to do the analysis it would take to try to convince EPA to exclude that data. And so, when I say try to, just, there's a lot of resources that go into putting together those, what they call exceptional event analyses. A lot of time and effort that goes into them. And EPA doesn't always approve what's been sent to them. So there are a number of steps. There's ways that you could exclude some portion of the data if you can demonstrate the area would have attained, but for that event.
Bill, to your point, though, if I could interject, through Weld County, and I know that North Front Range NFRMPO has been involved with, I'm looking for Andy Gunning. I think Andy left. Andy was here a moment ago. Andy's the executive director of the Suzette/Paul in PCOG, which is a Pikes Peak County, or Pikes Peak Council of Governments down there. And he is kind of spearheading an efforts with MPOs that are up and down the Rocky Mountain West, basically. They go up into Idaho and Montana, over into Utah. The Maricopa County is a big participant in this. We all have very similar atmospherics as far as we're higher in elevation, up along a mountain range. Our background ozone here, our non-native transport ozone is 48, 47, 48 parts per billion.
Depends on the monitor, but yeah, it could be.
So bottom line is, if we started a floor of 48 and we're dealing with a cap of 7, see, that's what you're talking about, is that floor and that stuff that then comes in and even exacerbates the problem. That's the conversation that we're trying to have. And this group is drafting a letter to the EPA that we're going to say, hey, these Rocky Mountain West MPOs, we think we need to be looked at differently because we start with a higher floor.
Scott, that's in our,
Right. And
that's in our.
to
Is
my-
that in the packet? That's outstanding.
It's actually
and-
an agenda item.
And to my point, I believe based on just what I've read about the fires and the smoke and the rest of the pollution, and if you look at those maps, that 48 baseline isn't a steady state. It depends on other factors that are happening in other states that then have an impact on our measured levels. 48 is not fixed. It varies over time depending on what's happening outside of our region is my point. And I know 3 weeks ago, there was an article about a researcher flying out of, I believe, out of one of the local airports with doing monitoring across the Intermountain West, trying to get a handle on where is this baseline pollution coming from and what's affecting it. And it just seems like we're on the tail end of the problem.
Maybe we'll move on next
Yeah.
agenda item, which is the Intermountain West MPOs and letter to EPA. And I think, Dina, you are dealing with that? That's your item?
I am. There are a couple of other issues in here, so please go ahead and read the report. But I will be happy to jump to the Intermountain West. Make sure. I do want to highlight the NOAA study, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration study that was just referenced.
Yes.
So there's a couple of studies that are going on. One is happening here in the Denver metro area along the Front Range. One is happening in Salt Lake City. They are both trying to characterize emissions in the area. So they're very localized efforts. So I want to highlight that because we'll come back to that too in the Intermountain West letter conversation. But Intermountain West and what Commissioner James has spoken about is that we were starting to, we put our heads together as like, we want to improve air quality. What exactly would we do if we did that? And when we started looking at, and what Andy started looking at down at Pikes Peak is, the degree of, these contributions that are coming from outside of their authority to control. And so they're kind of scratching their heads, and Andy mentioned it to other of his peers in the Intermountain West, and discovered that there were a number of non-attainment areas that were having similar problems. And so while Pikes Peak is not a non-attainment area, they're right on the edge, they're right adjacent to it. And so started talking to that group and found that there were a lot of similarities, and they had taken steps, and the reduction strategies were very different between the different areas, but taken steps to dramatically reduce the precursor pollutants that cause ozone. So again, ozone isn't directly emitted, it's a chemical reaction, happens up in the atmosphere. These areas had all dramatically reduced their NOx emissions, and I should say man-made NOx emissions, and also their man-made VOC emissions. And yet they were seeing ozone levels in recent years either staying static or actually increasing. And so they're all trying to figure out, they all want to improve air quality, but they also want to focus on efforts that will actually, you'll see benefits at the monitors. And so with that, they decided to approach EPA. One of those entities is Maricopa County in Arizona, Phoenix area. They'd already been approaching EPA about this very issue. They have very different issues and what causes and contributes to ozone in the area, but they were having the same problem. They're reducing their emissions and they're not seeing the benefits at the monitors. And so we looked at specifically 4 non-attainment areas. So that would be the Denver metro area, the Salt Lake City, Utah area, Phoenix area, and then Las Vegas, Nevada, all having the same problems. And so what we've done is we have put together a really awesome graphic in this letter that shows the dramatic reductions in precursor pollutants over time, and it shows how ozone levels have kind of stopped responding to those reductions and either staying static or increasing. So with that, that's kind of the impetus behind the letter. The ask of the letter to EPA is, hey, help us out understanding this, because all of these expectations and how the Clean Air Act is set up is that we would, we're supposed to focus on man-made emissions and what we can control, and that's supposed to solve the problem. It's not solving the problem. Here's the graphic, if you can see. The bars indicate both NOx and VOC emissions over time. They are collective for those 4 non-attainment areas that I mentioned. And then you have the dotted line showing the 3-year average of the fourth max values at the monitors. And you'll see towards the right-hand side, you don't see that it reduces, and then all of a sudden, somewhere in the 2000s, it starts either not responding or actually increasing. And so the ask of EPA is help us understand what's going on here so we can figure out what to do that will make a difference in terms of ozone levels in our area. So with that, I will turn it over to Paul.
Yeah, thanks. And so this letter really brings together all the points that you were talking about, from the beginning of this item, and kind of gets to that point of, well, what can we as an NPO and the other NPOs in the Intermountain region actually, do to try to advance the conversation around this issue. And so this letter was under development, before I joined the NPO. Over the last month, I've stepped into the conversations, and Dina's been a part of them as well. And the ask of the letter is asking EPA for more research and study on the ozone issue, the background ozone, in a comprehensive way. Dina did a great job of explaining this to me earlier, that even this new study that was discussed in the newspapers a couple of weeks ago is looking at an isolated event in a single place. And what the Intermountain NPOs are really looking for is a comprehensive study that looks at why is this phenomena happening that you see represented in the chart. And so earlier this month, or last month, I guess, we brought this letter to the NPO Executive Committee, talked about it in concept, and they were supportive of the approach. They wanted us to provide you with a copy of the letter. So in your attachments that you received yesterday, you've got the current draft. I'll say it's substantively pretty complete, but even as of this morning, there are still a few tweaks being made. This is a staff-to-staff level letter. It's coming from NPOs. The idea is that executive directors from the NPOs would sign, and it would go to the staff of the EPA, asking them to commit to study this issue. Originally, there had been some conversation about copying some congressional delegations on this letter as well. Actually, just this morning, the group got together and decided, in the spirit of really presenting this in a very collaborative and science-based way, that this is not a political letter at all. This is really a letter from staff level folks interested in the science to the regulators who are also interested in the science. And so the idea would be instead to just copy state regulatory agencies that work in the air quality space. And so the idea with this letter is to wrap it up here, I think, in the next couple of weeks, finalize who the signatories from the Intermountain West NPOs are who are going to participate in this letter, and then get that out to the EPA. And so you've got a draft copy that you can take a look at now, and we certainly commit to providing a final copy once all the final tweaks and edits are made.
Just a quick comment. Have you guys done a correlational analysis between the two sets of data? I mean, it's nice to have a picture like this, but if you're talking about the scientific data, you can do a correlational analysis on your decrease in precursors and the actual values measured at the same time of the ozone, which would provide a statistical basis to show that there's no correlation, or maybe even over here, there's a negative correlation.
We certainly could look into it. Ozone is a funny thing in that, again, it's not directly emitted. There's a whole lot of things that contribute to it, whether it's sunlight, meteorology. I want to highlight these reductions are reductions in man-made emissions.
Right.
Something that the areas have something control over. They don't have control over contributions that are coming from, international transport or some global kind of thing. There's a lot of chemistry that goes along with it. So like smoke plumes, there's significant impacts there that they don't fully understand. And so it's hard to do a correlational analysis when you have that many variables, but we can certainly take a look and see if there's anything.
What it says to me is the reduction doesn't have an impact on ozone. That's what it says. Looking at the graph data.
I mean, in recent years, but if you look at the, early on, it was making a difference. And so again, things have changed. And, we're not, the Denver metro area isn't the only area that is reducing emissions. Many areas are not reducing emissions, and states are reducing emissions. So the point is, what we knew about ozone may be different. Things may be different now because we have reduced man-made emissions enough. So now let's figure out where do we go next in terms of reduction strategy that will make a difference.
Yeah.
John?
Yeah.
So, couple things. One, first we all have to remember that the last statistic I saw from EPA was the United States contributes about 18% of the overall greenhouse gas to the ozone pollution greenhouse gas in the United States. 15% is what we control as a country.
Right.
So I don't think it's just these metropolitan areas that are suffering. I mean, I think it's across our country. We're seeing a lot of changes due to international stuff. And so we're going to have to figure that out. That's outside of this realm. But I just want to make a statement. I love this effort. I think we voted on to participate in this letter.
We did.
Like 6 months ago or so.
Been a while.
Yeah. So we don't have to redo that. We're just getting a copy of what we voted to approve and move forward, and we can comment if we have any issues. But here's a fear. We're showing some data. Back to your comment. The data is telling us one thing. Okay, they say, okay, you can't control your baseline of 48. I'm picking that number because it was thrown out. 48. We're going to hold you now. You're generating 80, 48 minus 80. What is that? Right? 32. Let's just say. based on the numbers. 32. Now we're gonna say you can't be above 20. So we're gonna still hit you over that 12, you gotta reduce the 12. This is just, I love the idea and I love the effort, but I don't know if it's not a futile effort. I almost feel like no matter what we come up with, there's always gonna be another person that comes up with a different number, that comes up and shows us a different chart, that shows us a different organizational statistical analysis. And I don't think this NPO, no one on this NPO has a wish or a want to hurt our environment. I mean, we're on this council, air quality council, right? Isn't that what we are? So having these discussions, whether you like it or not, it is political. It's going to be political. The EPA is controlled by a political branch of government. So I feverishly disagree that we do not have, I don't think EPA is going to go and do this study that you're talking about, you guys are talking about, because there's no congressional pressure. It's always going to depend on who's sitting in that seat of the president, the executive branch, right? We all know that. So I think Congress really needs to take this on, and Congress needs to put this on their agenda and let them work for the people, because EPA is not going to work for the people. The EPA is going to work for their administration. So I disagree with that personally, and I believe it needs to be the people we elect in office to work through this process, to find studies, to find ways to go through this study and do it personally.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yeah, so I just want to say that the numbers didn't come out of nowhere. I mean, this is talking about, these are based on what's healthy numbers are to be able to breathe healthy and what, for people with respiratory illness and stuff like that. So, I mean, you know, I'm not saying that there isn't a political element to it, but I will say that, I mean, the numbers weren't lowered arbitrarily. The numbers were lowered because, you know, it's not healthy to breathe air that has, that when the ozone, ground level ozone levels are that high. So, I mean, that's what it was based on. So, I mean, it's clear that like we've stagnated. The work that we did earlier was good and did lower those numbers. So I don't think that we should throw the baby out with the bathwater, but it's clear that it's harder and harder to get to those lower numbers. So, you know, I think that it's fair to say, help us figure this out.
Yeah.
And I think that that's what this letter does. And so I think that it's fair to say, look, we are not, but we have seen those numbers go lower. They're not we're still in non-compliance, but the work we've done thus far has proved to be, what's that, Johnny?
I don't know if looking at this chart, we've never been in compliance.
Well, we've gotten our numbers down. I mean, they used to be high.
75, we have never dropped below 75 on this chart according to the blue line. Denver Metropolitan North Range Area.
We've had stations that have dropped below. I mean, you know, yes, we haven't like, we have places where it's still really high, but we've also had numbers where things have significantly lowered. All I'm saying is, you know, I understand what people are saying, and I mean, the numbers are there because it's not healthy to breathe the air when the numbers are that high. But we've stagnated, and so we need to figure out why that is and what we can do at this point. And with regard to the wildfire smoke, that's true. It's not proven that that's necessarily increased. It does increase like the particulate matter, but it doesn't always increase ground level ozone. Those numbers have been high before those. Sometimes there's some cases where it's, you know, the studies we've seen at RAC is there's, you know, it can temporarily increase some of those numbers, but not over a long period of time usually. And so, you know, I think it's fine to send a letter. I mean, whether we want to send to the delegation or not, I don't really have a dog in that fight necessarily. But I think it's fair to say, help us figure this out because we feel like we're at a loss at this point. And, you know, we have enacted a lot of measures to lower these numbers. So
I totally understand that, and I totally agree with your position. And we need more tools because this tool doesn't seem to be working. That's right. I mean, if you look at the precursor data, it's been reduced 2/3, right? I mean, what if it goes down to 0? might still not be, I mean, you might still be out of compliance. We need other tools, other
Well, and there
research
will-
to support
Yeah.
other methods.
Well, and I think some of the methods like the lower, I mean, the new gas mix or whatever they call it, the reformulated gas mix is kind of proven in other places to lower like those ground level ozone levels. So I mean, I don't think that we have all the information we have to make really good informed decisions necessarily, or to implement, like when we're creating the STIP, are these, I don't know. I think that there is some stagnation that's happening, and maybe they need to help us figure out what would really work. And we are disadvantaged because of all our, we love the sunshine, doesn't help with the ozone, for sure.
I think if it's okay with the body, we'll move along.
And bottom line, we're sending a letter, right?
Bottom line,
Yeah,
we're
yeah,
sending a
yeah.
letter. Paul, do we have any time left to give you and Dina any feedback that they may have? It's in the handout, you guys haven't noticed. Is there time left for comments, or is it going tomorrow?
It's not going tomorrow. There's still some tweaks to be integrated from other NPOs that have commented. So yeah, if you've got some specific suggestions or ideas, then feel free to send those along to Dina and I, and we'll bring them to that Intermountain West group.
I think it's well done, Paul. When I read it, it was well done. I mean, it takes a very scientific approach to the purpose. So I'm not saying the letter's bad. I really, they've done a good job putting it together, making the argument for the research.
Yeah, I think the goal is to try to get some partnership and get a dialogue going, and really dig into the reasons why.
All right, you guys good?
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Go on to agenda item number 6, which is the Regional Air Quality Council. That's a written report. You can find that in the handout. Very quickly, we'll move to the Metropolitan Planning Organization agenda. Agenda item number 7, a report from the chair. I have talked to the chair. He has nothing further to say. We'll move on to number 8, which is the new executive director report. Paul, take it away.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple quick things. First off, I want to mention that if you haven't been hearing already, you're going to hear more about the fact that CDOT is beginning work to update its 10-year plan in coordination with a new statewide plan. The current 10-year plan covers the years 2020 to 2030, which we're right in the middle of that. So there's going to be a lot of more information continuing to roll out on that in the next couple months. For our part, as an NPO, we're going to need to determine the process that we want to use to populate that list of prioritized projects, whatever it ends up looking like. And so we need to have that, at least on the current schedule, ready by early 2025. So our tentative plan is to come to council next month in September with a discussion item to start talking about your preferences for the process for us to use. Looking at probably sometime around January to do a workshop, which I understand was the last way that prioritized list of projects was put together, and there seemed to have been a lot of support for that. So we'll talk more about it next month, and then just be looking forward to doing that work come January. The other thing I'd like for you all to know is that we're doing a lot of recruiting activity right now. You probably know that the NPO has an accountant position that's been vacant for a while, so that's a really key recruitment that we've got underway. We also have Anna Rose's position that will be opening up after tomorrow, and so we have a recruitment for a planner position. We also have our mobility planner, Brooke Patello, who's moving on to do other things, and tomorrow's her last day. So just giving you a heads up that you'll be seeing a lot of recruitment activity and eventually some new faces coming to the NPO.
Is there a finder's fee?
We can maybe talk about
Okay.
that offline.
Okay.
And then finally, I'm going to hand things over to Anna Rose to talk about a community advisory committee mobility audit that was conducted in June.
Thank you. This would have been part of the community advisory committee report last month, but we hadn't completed the analysis of the mobility audit that we'd done, so that's why we are bringing it this month. And so just wanted to walk through kind of what we did, why this location was chosen, and show the story map that we created to illustrate the different recommendations and issues that we saw in the area. So if you may or may not be aware that there was a transit center that opened in Loveland, in North Loveland earlier this year. And so this location was chosen to help look at the walkability and accessibility of the area around the transit center. And I think it was a really timely effort because that was right before they found out they got the notice of more funding to actually build the transit center building at that location.
With bathrooms.
With bathrooms.
Wow.
When we conduct these mobility audits, we use the North Front Range NPO's Bike and Ped Safety Reporter tool. And so that is the online mapping application that lets us put points on a map that where you can report and show pictures of what the conditions of the sidewalks and what the conditions of the accessibility are. So we had 3 different routes that the 8 participants looked at around the area, and some of the key takeaways that we found from this audit are that even though there are sidewalk conditions in the area, there's definitely room for improvement to make sure it's a really enhanced pedestrian experience, especially as they anticipate more traffic to this transit center. Also looking at different interactions between vehicles and pedestrians, including speed and intersection improvements, was one thing that was noted. And then also street crossings. And so even at places like the roundabouts, making sure that there's visibility of pedestrians as you're navigating through the area. So we do have all of the reports and the images in this story map that we have, and this is on the North Front Range NPO's website. For all of the mobility, walk, and bike audits that we have conducted, it's on our Bike and Ped page, so you can browse through all the recommendations from that from there.
Anna Rose, quick question. This is not mandated by anybody. This is something the NPO does voluntarily.
Yes.
Do we have any plans coming up? Those are all past ones, right?
Correct.
Do
We do.
How's that for?
For the August NOCO Back and Ped meeting, we'll be doing a walk audit in Greeley at I believe, the McCloskey natural area, right behind Family Funplex. And we will be looking at some of what we call social trails. So these are trails that are not formalized. These are trails, they're also known as GO trails. My understanding is Greeley Parks and Natural Areas is looking at what to do with those trails, whether to formalize them or to try to encourage people not to take them, because that shows them that there is a need for those locations and that people are going there to get to a location. But the question is, are those feasible to realistically be a trail one day? So that will be August 14th.
I'm going to add on to that. The city of Greeley is also doing a mobility study. And the mobility studies, I think it's about 95% complete. So I think this sort of ties into the mobility study and what they're trying to do in terms of different strains and different types of mobility for different areas within the transit.
Excellent. Paul, back to you.
Thanks, that's it for my report.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to item number, that'd be number 9, TAC report. It's written, it's in the packet, page 20. And number 10 is mobility report. That's a written report that is in a handout. And item number 11, second quarter 2024 tip modification, that is written. That's on page 21 in the packet. And then we got the CDOT and actives report, which is written page 22 of the packet. Okay, we do have one presentation. It's the item 13 FEMA base level engineering. Brian Barella, is he here? Or?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, not a problem. Thanks.
All right, good evening, everyone. I apologize you didn't get a read before packet. I know that's not typical. We have new information as of yesterday.
Oh.
That's why I wanted to make sure 2 things went out. I heard accessibility come up. This document is partially accessible, not fully. That's why it says draft all over it. And it has watermarks, so it cannot be read. So please take one and burn after reading. I'm Brian Burrell. I'm a resident engineer in hydraulics here at CDOT Region 4. I work out of the Greeley office, but I work across the entire region. So the fact sheet that you're about to receive, I remember chatting with folks at Weld County. Commissioner, I don't know if you were in the room, but one of the things I said is federal agencies love their one-page fact sheets, and there's always 2 pages of content. So here's your 2-page, 1-page fact sheet. So thank you, guys. I will be brief because I know you want to maintain a schedule. I'm working with Michael Tanner, the new state hydraulic engineer. We're peers together. He works at the program level at headquarters. I work at the region level. I'm here at your disposal for your communities to talk to you about base level engineering. This is a brand new thing that FEMA dreamt up. This is a new process and a program and a map that will come to you that will be tied in one way or another potentially to land use code, which you enforce at a local level, and federal disaster assistance. And I really want to catch your attention with that second part because I am here, as I've said to the other transportation planning regions, to pick a fight with the federal government. Full disclosure, Johnny, you know me. This is not like me to do this kind of stuff. Here I am. All right. So what base level engineering is, it's a way for FEMA, Federal Emergency Management Agency, to map risk in your communities in places where it may not have been mapped before. It's a newer program that does one of 3 things. It either gives you an initial identification of flood risk, or it takes old flood risk and updates it, or it takes outdated flood risk and gives it better science. Any one of those 3 might be a good idea. These are for areas that don't have models today. They don't have computer models. They were truly drawn with big crayons in the 70s by me and my buddies when we were little kids. And they're for basins where you have greater than a square mile and more than half a foot of water depth. The rest is technical details, rated at your leisure. The difference between what we did in the past, up here on the top right of your screen, and what we do today is we used to use cross sections. Now we use terrain models. We do everything in 3 dimensions instead of 2. And so the Water Conservation Board, the Colorado Water Conservation Board, has said that the work they are doing with FEMA's money to create base level engineering studies is not going to be detailed enough to be considered for design. What that means is they're giving you a half-baked product. And that is not editorial. That is the challenge that myself and Michael Tanner are up against. So these models don't include details on bridges, culverts, your county roads and what you might have on them. It doesn't include anything except these hydrologic connectors. That's proxy for reality. And a hydraulic model is a computer rendering of ground, water. That's not reality either. So you take some non-reality, you add some non-reality, you've got a base level engineering study. And again, I'm trying to get you riled up because I'm pretty riled up about this. And I spend literally 2 or 3 hours of my day every day now just trying to help sort out solutions to these challenges. So if they're not detailed enough for hydraulic studies, that means when it comes to you or it comes to us for infrastructure improvements, we have to take this half-baked cake, dress it back up, put it back in the oven, and then serve it. So we're paying for something twice with taxpayer funding. That should get you riled up too. Here's Phillips County. Hugo is in the middle, Lyman is up here, Araba, Genoa, we're up here on I-70. This county is receiving new base level engineering studies for 2,600 miles of river. Right now they have about 10 miles of FEMA regulatory floodplain. Potentially they're going to add 2,600, okay? Stay with me. This impacts 52 major CDOT structures and 32 minor CDOT structures. And the bottom line is, if I have to go in and repair or replace any of these 84 structures, I have to do it at my cost, and they are moving my design targets higher than they were before. Instead of designing a 25-year bridge, I may be designing a 100-year bridge. And the cost escalation associated with that is something I'm calculating today with a whole team of engineers at our office in Greeley. Weld County just had a meeting on this week. There's a few folks in Weld County. I don't think, raise your hand if you were part of that meeting. I don't think you were in there. Okay, I know there's a recording. I recommend you listen to it. Elizabeth has already reached out to me to chat with me about details tonight after this meeting. But Weld County's situation looks no better than Lincoln. Y'all are about to get 1,800 extra miles of potential regulatory floodplain. Here's the hook. Don't accept it as regulatory. In all of your communities, I'm imploring you, until the cake is fully baked, do not accept it as regulatory in a means and method to tell people with their private property what they can and cannot do. And that is a vicious statement. I have to stand accountable to Mark Peterson, county engineer for Laramie tomorrow for that same statement at 1 o'clock. I have an explanation for y'all, and it's in here. So again, going back to the counties affected by this, everything in red, this is in just Region 4 communities here at CDOT, is currently going through a base level engineering process. Laramie County and Boulder County are next. Weld County had their discovery kickoff meeting this week. All the eastern folks, your neighbors out to the east, they're already in the middle of this, up to and including Morgan County, who actually, I think, just finished their process. And I told the commissioners there, whatever you do, don't adopt those zone A's as regulatory. Just don't do it. Don't do it yet. Okay? The reason I'm saying this is right here in the middle in bold. The Water Conservation Board says, this is a quote, base level engineering studies may have significant impacts on CDOT projects if adopted, specifically the budget. Right now, I'm seeing about a 20% cost escalation. Very small sample size, I'm hoping that number comes down. But what it means is these studies, for me to have to go in, hire a team, or do it myself with my team, and update this study so it's scientifically accurate and follows standards, is going to cost me about 15 to 20% more money than it does today. The highest number I've seen is 24%. That's too much. That's more money to do the same amount of work, or I have to cut down our scope of work and deliver fewer infrastructure projects to all the communities that fund and put together our 10-year plan projects. That's a problem. And the Water Conservation Board says they're not scoped to do roads, culverts, bridges, or anything else that they're not already doing. They've got LiDAR data for the whole county, and that's all they use. And then they use these other proxies that I'm going to show you in a minute. We have information that we're ready to give to them. Counties and towns have offered information to them. And what we heard in the past, this is back in March, is we can't use your info because we're not scoped to put it in there. That's great. We pressed a little harder, said partner with us, work with us. We'll do the work for you. You give me the model, I'll code it in myself. And I have an army of amazing folks, 4 FTEs in my office that can help. And at first they said no. And then when we met with Phillips County last month, they said, well, maybe. And then when we met with Weld County yesterday, they said, yeah, we're into that. So we're pushing a rock uphill. I need your collective help pushing the feds to say yes. Here's a case study. Phillips County, I just mentioned. Town of Holyoke is right here. We have lots and lots of state and federal highways across through this county. There's a watershed to the north and a watershed to the south, and everything goes into Nebraska and a little bit of Kansas. They're doing everything else that everybody else does, and I read the report for this county that said, whatever we do, we don't want to put in the right infrastructure because we don't want to create artificial backwater. That's not normal for FEMA. FEMA usually says, I want to show the deepest depths and the widest floodplain spread widths possible, so I have a conservative estimate of life safety and property risk in that community. This does exactly the opposite. So it flies in the face of standards of practice that are 40 years old. It's under-conservative with respect to standard engineering practices. And this is what it looks like. This is on US Highway 385, mile 289, where we have a 36-inch culvert in use today, but instead of putting a 36-inch culvert in there, we're just assuming it's plugged, which is what we've done for the entire 26 years of my career. FEMA's contractors with FEMA's orders put in a notch, this is vertically exaggerated. It's 97 feet tall and 60 feet wide. This room is approximately 60 feet long. To give you a perspective of how this proxy element is supposed to emulate a 3-foot diameter culvert, which is about this big. I'm no scientist, but to me, this just doesn't add up. This does not make common sense why this practice at thousands of locations in this county should continue forward as reasonable estimate of flood risk. When I take these notches out, and I assume this pipe is closed up, just close up the top of the road, we're seeing rises of up to 2.5 feet or more through the entire county. And here's what this looks like. This is Highway 385 at Holyoke, going north in Sedgwick County. This is US 6. Johnny, help me out. 23? Can't be right.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Okay, that's a lucky guess, because I can kind of see it there.
Trying to think, but it is crazy.
All these little color splashes are little areas of rise where when I took out these proxy notches and ran the model again, made no other changes. And those rises are all calculated right here. This is more water over our highway. County roads in Phillips County are all experiencing the same rises at every single mile or 2 miles on their grid. Same for your communities. This problem doesn't just exist in Phillips County. I've seen it in Pueblo County, I've seen it in Phillips County. I'm about to see it in Weld County, I'm pretty sure. I haven't done any calculations there because we don't have the models yet. But we have other folks in the southwest corner of the state seeing the exact same thing in La Plata County, in and around Durango. This is a statewide problem. So let me jump to the conclusion because I don't want to waste any of your time. I know you have questions. Two things that me and the state hydraulic engineer are trying to sell to you all as communities is encourage us, partner with us, to encourage FEMA to calibrate more representative hydro connectors. If you have to do this, make it kind of sort of look like a 36-inch pole. These dimensions don't really fit as a solution to the problem that I think they're trying to solve. And second, if you're going to do a zone A, you all, and I want you to write this down as elected officials especially, and the staff that support elected officials, an enhanced zone A is code for FEMA, you go spend more money and come back with a more baked cake. This is what I just learned this week. And I vetted this in two other CDOT regions, and it sounds like it's going to play very well. So in the world of coming to a federal partner with solutions, not problems, this is going to speak loudly. Ask for, demand enhanced zone A's through partnering. You as National Flood Insurance Program communities have the authority to tell the feds, thank you, no thank you. And it will not jeopardize your disaster assistance. I had a long conversation with the Morgan County Commissioners about this same thing at Eastern TPR this early spring. And they said, I'm going to loosely quote it here, we heard FEMA say if we don't adopt these base level engineering areas, it will jeopardize our disaster assistance. I said, I was in the same room with you. I heard the same pressure campaign. That was the message their body language conveyed 100%. Their words were a little different. I said, and I called Terry Fade, and I called Marta Blanco Castaño, and I asked them that question. I said, no, we never intended for that message to move across. And I said, Terry and Marta, are you aware that the Morgan County Commissioners heard that message? And they said, we'll go back and chat with them. I said, good, because I'm going to chat with them tomorrow. And I conveyed that message. And I don't know if the Water Conservation Board came back to them. So in this back and forth ping pong game of communication that we've all been playing since we were little kids, I can assure you, you need to do what I recommended the last time. I know Commissioner Stevens, you heard this as well. Ask the Water Conservation Board and FEMA 2 questions. You're getting everything filtered through me. This is my agency, blows my old logo. But you need to go to the Water Conservation Board and ask them the same 2 questions that I've been asking. Number 1, will this jeopardize our disaster assistance? And number 2, will this jeopardize our disaster assistance? I saw that the same question, right? If you ask 2 questions, you get 2 different answers, I guarantee you have a problem. And I shared that with the Water Conservation Board too. I said, this question asked twice needs to have 1 answer. And they're like, got it. And I think they're a little nervous. And I feel a little bad about that. Going back to base level engineering, there are benefits that they sell, but there's code behind the benefits. So in the world of communication, again, when they tell you that there's risks that exist that weren't mapped previously, true statement, but there's 20% more to that statement that risk identification and risk accuracy are 2 different things. And it's accuracy I'm really worried about here as a professional engineer. Here's another one. They're going to show you risk across the entire watershed on miles of rivers. Like, here's your whole county, isn't that great? The problem is, those models are so large, you cannot scale them down to replace a bridge, or to clean out a culvert, or to work with us on a pavement overlay where there's some water washing over the road, and I have to show there's no rise on our shared highway asset. So I have to go in and fix everything on a model that's so big, and how big is it in Phillips County? It's 18.5 gigabytes. That's the smallest one I've seen yet, and I've seen 5 of these. 5. Weld County, I think you have 8 of these coming at you. Some of them coming from other counties. We share a lot of watersheds with a lot of other adjacent jurisdictions. So be ready, these models are so big, FEMA's contractors cannot upload them to FEMA's library. They have to take a jump drive, like the one that I gave you all today to put this presentation on here, and somebody has to send it to Washington, D.C., and somebody in D.C. has to upload it inside the igloo or tent or the really cool building, wherever this stuff is housed, and physically upload them because they can't move this much data from these models. So again, is this countywide? Does it look like it's great? Yes, but I'm going to tell you something else. It's not on here. You touch any one thing in this model, and in Phillips County there were over 1,000 roadways and rivers that I had to touch. If I touch any one of them, and change anything, the entire county model changes. If I take that computer, this model, that computer, hit run and change nothing else, it produces different results. You guys, I vetted this with the Federal Highway Resource Center, the Federal Highway Administration Resource Center, Scott Hogan, and Laura Gerard. They said this HECRAS 2D software is not ready for this. I agree 100%. It doesn't do bridges, for one thing. And for another, you cannot reproduce the results on the same computer. The duplicate effective process that I'm required to use by federal standards does not work yet with HECRAS 2D. And that's a problem because all of these models, all of them nationwide are going through HECRAS. We're almost done. Here's where I want you to stand your ground. Don't let anything go to level 2. They're going to give you Johnny Olson, Commissioner James, in Weld County, 1,800 miles of new rivers that have base level engineering floodplains. And they're going to say, that's your level 1, best available information. You're free to share that with the public. You don't have to give credit to anybody but them. And say, this is something prepared by FEMA. Maybe you want to know about risk. You're making decisions in your own private land. Your responsibility is fulfilled. If you bring this to level 2 and make them a regulatory zone A, and when I worked in Weld County, there were 43 of these. I don't know how many there are today. But if you add to that list of 43 with thousands more, then you will be required as a community, Greeley, Weld County, Tennant, Lerner County, to enforce land use standards in those zone A areas. So the difference between giving folks information that could make common sense to allow them to make decisions for their land and their needs versus telling them they have to do something at their cost and probably hire an engineer to do it, the divide between those two levels of expectation, between a mandate and information only, is a very wide gap. And I do not recommend you bridge that gap yet, except with that one phrase I told you about, enhanced zone A's.
So what you're telling us, now, if I can hop in here real quick,
Please
and I
do,
appreciate
yes.
your passion, and you're obviously very learned on this. You are speaking for the agency that you work for and that we all know and love, and so you're talking a lot about road and bridge. This will impact land use.
Yes.
This will impact if somebody wants to put an addition on their barn, they're likely going to get a no because the federal government's sticking their damn nose in my county. Boy, everybody's jealous of land use all of a sudden. State wants land use, now the feds want land use. That is a local government right. Can I get mad at that?
I was hoping you would. Down the table a little bit, so I don't have to.
So yeah, ask for detail. Tell them, I don't want to, if you're gonna put time into it, give me a 3 and don't make me pay for it. Do not put this on me as an unfunded mandate to enforce. So there were other details in there. I'm not gonna bore you with it. I've already taken a lot of your time. The fact sheet will hopefully give you a condensed version of everything that I told you. It's a little less editorial. It's being vetted right now through headquarters. It has not been reviewed by the chief engineer. So please, please, please burn after reading. The presentation has been vetted both with the Colorado Water Conservation Board. Verbally, the Federal Emergency Management Agency is aware that we distributed it. And I made the mistake last time of not warning the Water Conservation Board that you all might be calling them, but please call Terry Fate at the Colorado Water Conservation Board. I will duly warn her tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. That she probably has questions from you all that she should field. But Marta Blanco Castano, Terry Fate at the Water Conservation Board, and of course us, we're always at your service. But please keep asking questions, keep demanding accurate science if you have to back it. I saw a couple of hands up here.
Yeah, any questions for Brian? Johnny?
So this is just not a Colorado thing. They just have to, well, I mean, I'm sure there's other people as a what is the National Floodplain Group?
ASFPM actually supports this. So when I was the vice chair of the board under your direction.
Supports you or this?
This, I oppose this as vice chair on behalf of the Department of Transportation and the nation. I said this language from Executive Order 13690 issued by President Barack Obama in 2015 started this ball rolling. And FEMA decided that this was a solution to all their problems. Johnny, the problem they're trying to solve is to get more people to pay flood insurance when they put their barn in a floodplain, and to try to get more money into that program, which has been bankrupt since Hurricane Katrina in 2005. So the goals behind this,
Ding.
and that is editorial. The goals behind
It's not
this,
editorial.
I don't know for a fact. it's
Well,
still
one of the things that I want to comment is, I will tell you, they're not going to be the only agency. You got to remember, FHWA's Emergency Management Fund, ER Fund, and this fund, they are dwindling fast because and most of it's on the coast, right? We're getting punished. We don't have as many floods inland as they do on the coast, right? But there's gonna be a day, the reason they wanna do these types of things is so they don't have to go out and use their FEMA resources to do that, and it gives them the leverage to say, hey, you were in a floodplain, or hey, and they do have programs, it's called Protect. The Protect program is made to help you solve these problems in those areas. But that's $88 billion for the entire country, and it's not gonna, it could be $8 billion in Colorado by the time we're done. So they are, I can tell you, the federal government is really worried about, we can't keep going in if there's been twice damaged places, right? We gotta start doing our own work. But at the end of the day, that doesn't mean give us a blanket way that we're gonna do it for everything. Everything, you can't protect everything to 100%. You just can't. It would cost you trillions and trillions of dollars just in your community, not let alone the state. So you've got to make engineering scientific decisions that are calculated, that have been identified, that they can say, hey, this is the result we're going to get, this is what we need to do. But that's on an individual basis, not on a base model like this.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Brian. Appreciate it. All right, there is nothing on the consent agenda. We'll move on to the action items. Agenda item number 14 is the July 2024 TIP amendment. And Anna Rose, I believe you're up. Anna Rose, you're just a jack of all trades. We're gonna miss you. We honestly are. You want to follow along, it's on page 29 of the packet.
All right, thank you. The amendment to the Transportation Improvement Program for July 2024 includes 3 revision requests. The first is from Colorado State University, which is adding a new project, hydrogen refueling infrastructure at CSU, with 2.8 million federal charging and fueling infrastructure funds in fiscal years 25 through 27. And 2 project revisions from the city of Greeley for the US 34 and 35th Avenue interchange and the US 34 and 47th Avenue interchange projects. These were fully locally funded projects, and the federal RAISE grant that they received is offsetting some of the local funding in earlier years and replacing it with the federal RAISE funding in later years. An equity analysis for the new location-specific project, so the CSU project, is included in the packet. The public comment period for the July 2024 TIP amendment began on July 10th and will conclude on August 8th. Approval by the Planning Council is contingent on no further public comment or no public comment being received before the end of the public comment period. One thing I wanted to show to the Planning Council is the updated TIP tables. We mentioned that this would be coming last month. This is just a different format for the tables to help us present them more accessibly. And so just wanted to let everybody see this, that it is that new format. A few things that I just want to point out is that we have the column that's fiscal year 24 to 27. That's the active years of the TIP. And so that's going to include everything that's in fiscal year 24 rolled through 27 here. The previous funding and future funding are for funding years outside of the active years of the TIP. So previous funding is going to be fiscal year 23 or before. Future funding is fiscal year 28 or beyond, because the RAISE funding for these projects are fiscal year 28. It is showing in future funding at this time, and that will be moved into the active years of the TIP upon the adoption of the new TIP next year. With that, the Technical Advisory Committee recommended Planning Council approval of the July 2024 TIP amendment at their last meeting.
Excellent. Any questions or discussion? All right. Seeing none, technically, I'm supposed to ask if there's anyone from the public who wishes to make public comment. I see none. All right. I'll entertain a motion, which is found on page 36 of the packet. This is resolution number 2024-012 of the North Front Range Transportation and Air Quality Planning Council, approving the July 2024 amendment to the fiscal year 2024-2027 Transportation Improvement Program.
Mr. Chair, this is Will Carlsbeck, so moved.
Thank you, Will. A second?
Second.
All right, you got it. All right, any further discussion? All right, thanks, Will. All right. I guess we vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Excellent. We are done with that item. Thank you. Let's see. All right, let's move on to discussion items. Agenda item number 15, Van Gogh Fair increases for 2025. Paul, I don't know how you got this, but welcome to the group.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So this item tonight is a discussion item to get council's feedback on staff's proposal to resume implementing fare increases for the Van Gogh Van Pooling program, starting with a 5% increase in January of 2025. So there's a couple different revenue streams that come together to support the program, and fares being paid by the customers of the service are an important part of that. The last time that the fares were adjusted was in 2019, and council approved a 2% increase to the fare in that year. Before that, fares have been adjusted not every year, but most years. And so in 2019, when council approved that, it was with the intent that that would begin a program of every year doing a regular increase to be able to keep pace with inflation. Unfortunately, the best laid plans, COVID happened in 2020, and Van Gogh, like all public transportation providers, had to make a lot of changes to balance providing service and remaining solvent. And so for the next 4 years, those regular fare increases were not implemented. So here we are 4 years later. Service has picked back up. We're adding new routes. We added a new route with 3 riders just the other day. We're still only back to about 50% of pre-COVID levels, but we are adding new riders. And since 2020, the consumer price index has gone up 20.8%, and that's reflected in our operating costs for Van Gogh. Starting back up with an annual increase of 5% would add about $12 a month to our median monthly fare, which is currently $234 a month. So in getting ready for this change, our operations manager notified all of our riders on Van Gogh about the proposal, invited them if they wanted to come and speak during public comment today, which as you saw, nobody chose to come. But we did receive 4 email responses from customers, and all 4 of those emails were favorable to the change. They recognized that the costs had gone up, and they thought that the 5% increase was reasonable. And so we welcome any feedback or questions that you've got. I'll try and answer this evening or come back if I don't know the answer. And then based on your feedback tonight, our plan would be to come back next month with either a consent item or an action item to implement this change coming in January.
Does this, we increase the 5% and then going forward in 26, do we reevaluate and increase again like the plan was in 2019? Or is this like a said and done for another 4 years?
You take action each year on the increase, and so it would give us a chance to evaluate where we are, particularly that ridership level. And so based on the analysis next year, we might come back with a number that is higher or lower than the 5%. But the idea would be that we'd make a routine of it and be coming each year as opposed to skipping years in between. So,
Take it you're fully in support of that.
yes, sir.
And I have a question, Chair.
Commissioner, go ahead.
So, we know numbers are down since COVID and, people are doing more remote work. What are, and I probably ask this question every time we talk about Van Gogh, but what are we doing to promote the plan at this point? Because I think it's a really great opportunity for people who, don't want to ride alone, who don't want to drive all the time, who want to, save money, who want to, help the environment. So there's a lot of really good benefits that come from it. What are we doing to encourage folks?
Yeah, I can tell you about the couple of things that we're doing like right now. One of those is that we've got a fresh partnership with the city of Fort Collins where they're offering an incentive to people who will either begin or end a trip within the city limits of Fort Collins. And that's a 6-month subsidy basically that would help to reduce the costs of using Van Gogh. So we're using that as an end to try to attract more customers in Fort Collins. And then our operations manager has also been doing an entire series of show and tells basically with CSU staff, faculty, and students in an attempt to get more CSU, both the staff side and the student side, aware of the program, and especially they can pair that up with the Fort Collins subsidy as well. So it's an exceptional time to be doing those conversations.
Yeah, that's great, thanks. Yeah, I think anything we can think of to kind of get people to, I don't know if most of them go to like Boulder County or, Denver area, like are we ever in touch with some of those big employers where we know they're going already, or, I don't know, maybe a finder's fee for people who, like, if they encourage somebody to do it and they join the program, they get I don't know. I'm just trying to think of ways that we could, because it would be nice to get those numbers back out.
Yeah, thank you. Those are great suggestions, and I'm just kind of learning all the different routes, and I know that I-25 is very heavily traveled north and south. In particular, there's a lot of incentives available if people are traveling into Boulder. University of Colorado Boulder has incentives, the city of Boulder has incentives, and a lot of those are stackable as well. So yeah, our operations manager is in regular contact with some of the large employers like CU Boulder, and always looking for others that he can spread the word about what the program offers.
Madam Mayor, I think you had a question.
I did. So I'm going to assume this program probably, as it runs a deficit, I mean, would it, supplement? So what is this going to help? I mean, how big is it? The gap between, the fare increase and the expenses to run the program?
Yeah, so we run Van Gogh as an enterprise fund, and so it's funded primarily through fares because it's a public transit service. We also enter into a sales tax exchange with the city of Fort Collins, and so FTA funding would come to the program, but because these are vans and not buses, we couldn't buy enough rolling stock to use all of the funds that would be available from FTA. And so we entered into an exchange with Fort Collins. So that helps to make up a portion of operating expenses too. Because the numbers are so far down right now in terms of ridership, the program is pulling about, from this year's budget, it was budgeted about $120,000 out of the program's reserves to keep operations going. Based on how some of the numbers are looking this far through the year, I think there's, it's probably about 20,000 less than that, so maybe about $100,000 deficit. The 5% increase starts to slowly chip away at that. If there's no change in ridership, that'd be about an extra $7,500 that we see in 2025 of fare dollars that would be coming through. So it's really a combination. The main lever is going to be increasing ridership, and then you stack on top of that, trying to keep pace with inflation instead of falling further behind, and that's how you can start to chip away at the $100,000 that's projected to come out of reserves.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, Commissioner.
One, I don't know why we don't make it standard practice just to put a cost of living escalator, not a cost of living, but an inflationary escalator in there every year anyway. It's just smart business. Secondly, the 50% down is not unique to our particular entity, is it? I mean, that's not like, oh no, we suck again. That's kind of on par with the decrease we've seen in ridership across the board nationwide in transit organizations, correct? I mean, we're still off that mark. What I'm trying to say is, we're sucking as bad as everybody else. I mean, it's not indicative to our organization.
Yeah, Commissioner James, that's absolutely right. All across the country, including in our region, transit providers took a really big hit in ridership during the pandemic, and it's been very slow to come back. So that 50% number is not inconsistent with any other kind of public transit service.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, you'll bring this next month as an agenda item. Second, that'll be the plan. Cool. Thank you very much. Number 16, Anna Rose again. NMOF discussion number 2.
Well, with it being my last meeting, I just wanted to make sure that I left on a high note.
We appreciate that.
Thank you. Over the last couple months, we have started the discussion of our next call for projects for the state multimodal transportation and mitigation options funds. A lot of the specifics of this funding program haven't changed in the last, since the last call that we did in 2022, but I will review some of the goals of the program and the different pieces that we've discussed with TAC so far as we move forward. So as I mentioned, the MMOF program is a state CDOT funding program. And so they've outlined what the goals of this program are and the eligible projects, project types for the MMOF program. So the goals of the MMOF program are to benefit seniors by making aging in place more feasible, benefit residents of communities in rural and disproportionately impacted communities by providing them with more accessible and flexible public transportation services, provide enhanced mobility for persons with disabilities, provide safe routes to school for children, increase access to and or usage of transit or multi-use facilities, and reduce emissions of air pollutants with this wonderfully circular definition, but essentially reduce emissions of air pollutants for greenhouse gases.
You know, you can tell us how you really feel since you're leaving.
Because that's how I feel, right?
It's just a little bit of circular definition. So the first thing I want to show you is the amount of funding that we have available that we're going to be looking at for this call. We have already awarded funding in fiscal years 24 and 25. We did that, I think, at the beginning of potentially last year, just so that we can be ahead of the game on that, so that people can start to program those projects. But we did have additional funding in those years that we'd be looking at awarding for this. And so the initial estimate that we have between fiscal year 24 and fiscal year 28 is about it's about $6 million, just under $6 million. We've already awarded $1.3 million, so this call would be for about $4.5 million. Just wanted to review the proposed timeline for this call. At this time, we're looking at having the call open in October, applications to be due mid-November, and then final council action on the awards would be at the February Planning Council meeting. One of the things that has changed within the CDOT program for MMOF is the match rates. They updated the match reduction formula for this program to include more up-to-date data than was used before. And so that is the table that we have here. The two communities that were affected by this change are Evans and Loveland, who went from having a 50% match rate to a 25% match rate. So for most of the MMOF program, it is 50% project cost, so it's essentially a 1-to-1 ratio of MMOF dollars and local dollars. But for Evans, Greeley, Loveland, and Larimer County, they only are required to provide a 25% match, and for Garden City, it is a 0% match. There is the option of additional alleviation based on a project-by-project basis. So we saw this during our last call with Weld County. submitted paperwork to the Transportation Commission outlining the reason why they were requesting a lower match rate. And that was granted for specifically that project. So additional communities that have that higher match rate are allowed to request with documentation a lower match rate. Looking at the different project types that are eligible under the MMOF program, the North Front Range NPO has split them into two separate categories to look at scoring criteria for different types of projects. So the first category is quantifiable greenhouse gas reducing projects. And so that's operating costs for new and fixed route transit and capital costs for fixed route transit, transportation demand management programs, multimodal mobility projects enabled by new technology, greenhouse gas mitigation projects that specifically increase multimodal travel or decrease BMT, and then bicycle and pedestrian projects. So those types of projects, we're actually able to perform calculations for greenhouse gas emission reductions. Then we have category B, which is non-quantifiable or non-greenhouse gas reducing projects. And this is operating costs for existing fixed route transit, operating capital costs for on-demand transit, multimodal transportation studies, and modeling tools. When talking with the TAC about this program, we discussed whether or not we wanted to change the scoring criteria from the 2022 MMOF call or to keep it the same. Through those discussions, we had determined that the best way to move forward is to keep the scoring criteria the same as we had done in 2022. We just have changed the way that we calculate that. So all of these different scoring criteria are the same, just the way that we calculate them. We have discussed to just make sure that it is fair and it makes sense and a lot more quantifiable. So the different categories that people would be scored on are multimodal improvements in network connectivity, community benefits. So this is mostly focused on the safety impacts of projects, providing transportation equity, greenhouse gas emissions reductions, and this is where you'll see the difference between category A and category B. Category B doesn't have the emissions reductions. That has been moved to different criteria, integration with local and regional plans, and then partnerships. I do have in this presentation more of the details about each of these criteria and how we've discussed with TAC how to calculate this. Unless there are specific questions, I won't linger on these slides. So I do want to pause there just to see if there was any piece of, or any one of these topics that we wanted to look at any further.
And girls, can you go back a page? I think it's one page.
Sorry.
Go back a page. All right, so multimodal mobility projects enabled by new technology. Can you give me an example of that? Struggling with that.
I think that some of that can be like some of the bike sharing and scooter sharing, things like that. There's not really a lot of specifics on what exactly that project type is. We haven't had anybody come and ask for one of those specific types of projects. Most of the projects that we've seen through this program from our local agencies are going to be a lot more focused on like bike and ped and transit projects.
Queue jumps for transit, adaptive signal could maybe fall into that.
Yeah, potentially.
Electronic type of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, Commissioner.
Just why are GHG emissions reductions removed from category B?
The category B projects are non-quantifiable or non-greenhouse gas reducing projects. So
because like it's already existing fixed route transit, so it's already
correct. Okay. So adding state dollars to the operating costs of an existing route isn't increasing. Isn't necessarily increasing ridership, it's just offsetting the local costs. So we wouldn't be able to calculate greenhouse gas emissions reductions on that.
But What
don't,
about the on-demand though? I mean, there'd be some.
it could potentially, on-demand transit could potentially, but also it's not guaranteed to reduce greenhouse gases, because you, for a new on-demand service, you might have, it might actually show more greenhouse gas if you have more VMT that you're adding because of that. So we didn't want to punish those projects because they are good projects that are eligible under this program, but
they might not be able to show that decrease
Yeah.
in GHG, and so.
yeah. And
Okay.
same with things like the multimodal transportation studies. You could have pieces in there that would benefit air quality, but a study in and of itself is not going to show greenhouse gas reductions. So we don't want to have to make those projects compete against each other.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Is that it?
Yes, are you done?
Wanted to make sure there wasn't any questions about this before I just move on to the rest.
Go ahead.
Okay, cool. So let me skip ahead a few slides. We can revisit that if anybody has more questions. So next they wanted to talk about the award minimums and maximums. The minimum project, the minimum awards are set by CDOT. We're carrying that over into our recommendation that for infrastructure or construction projects, they require a $300,000 minimum project size. So if you're one of the communities that has a 50% match rate, the minimum there would be $150,000 of MMOF requested with $150,000 of local match being provided. For transit projects, non-infrastructure projects that are transit projects, planning projects and studies, it's a $25,000 minimum MMOF request. And those are what CDOT has recommended and we are carrying forward. As far as maximums, what we discussed with TAC at our last meeting is that the maximum award would be $2 million per project and a $2 million per agency across all project application maximum. With, that's what we felt was reasonable with the $4.5 million that we have available to award in this call. One of the things that I wanted to bring to this group was specifically looking at eligible applicants to make sure we didn't want to make any updates to this from our last time. So we have always said that NFRMPO member agencies, so cities and counties, are eligible to apply for funds. But then we've also said that partner agencies, which include CDOT and the Regional Air Quality Council, would be able to apply as well. Any other agencies, so for instance, school districts, nonprofits, colleges, anything like that, would have to apply through our member agency, and that would then count against that member agency's total dollar amount that they're able to be awarded. So then just looking at next steps, we will continue to work on developing the guidelines for this call. So eligible applicants was one of the things we hadn't discussed at TAC yet. Then just looking at project requirements and then the applications and worksheets and getting more of those details ironed out before opening that call in October. And so we will go back to TAC next month to have further discussion. It can come back to council after that as well, and then the following months would come back for action. And that was all I had.
Any final questions? Yes, John.
Not a question, but a comment. This is a major topic at STAC over the last, we did the whole MMF formulas and break it out to the communities and to the MPOs and everything, the state and everybody. The state is holding more money back this year out of MMOF to help administer the local agency and the contracts and all the projects. So they held out, I think, $6 million. Well, just so you guys all know, the STAC wrote a letter to the executive director, the governor, and the legislature. They held out another $8 million this year out of the 260 MMOF formula that was supposed to come to the locals and to the state. you like it or not, it was a smoking room discussion with no discussion with anybody from locals or anything else. So heavy discussion, you see the numbers are pretty low compared to past, and there's just been money being siphoned off. The stack did write a letter. I've never heard the outcome. Suzette was she was the one that wrote the letter to get all the stack people together. It was one of her last exercises I volunteered her for before she left. For everybody, and it was submitted by the chair and vice chair. So just so you know, that they're slowly picking at our MMOF, and I don't think it's right. I mean, we start taking money away from the locals to do the major projects that are gonna help reduce greenhouse gas, that are gonna help build better systems for our local communities. They were stripping it off. So I just wanna let everybody know this was a heavy discussion for a few months. But the numbers are pretty low I think in the next few years' calls.
Will you let us know if you hear back on that? Just
Yeah.
because I'm,
I haven't heard anything for the last 2 months, but if anything comes out of it, Vince hasn't reported on anything.
I think it'll be really good for us in this upcoming legislative session to kind of keep an eye on that. Because there's not as much money to go around at the state level, this kind of shell game of like, we have this new project, it's funding, I think ozone-free fares, is that what it, that 6 million went to? And so like, we have this new program, but it really took money out of an existing program. And even though it's a good program, I mean, this is a good program. So, it's hard to say that that program's a better program than this program is. And yet now this program has fewer dollars. And so I guess I think it's just something we need to be really cognizant of in the new legislative session when they start talking about money, because when we talked about this before, I won't beat a dead horse, but I advocated for that program not knowing that the money was coming out of our MMOF. I thought maybe it was a CDOT fund that it was coming out of, or some general fund dollars, and it was coming out of our dollars. And I wouldn't have advocated for that if it.
And Dr. Cobb was the one that brought it up, and then everybody else jumped on. But it's those smoking room discussions that we don't hear about until sometimes after the decisions have been made too. And I think that's the point, that would bring us to the table. We're not saying we wouldn't do it, but give us a choice to be part of it, not just do it and tell us later that it's been done.
Well, and don't call it, a new program with money that's just pulled out of an old program that was working just fine. It's really not, a new program. It's just refunneling.
This has been through the ringer, is all I'm saying.
Yeah, thanks.
We did like 4 months of MMOF formulas, and it was, I think I actually won that battle, didn't I? But we won that battle.
Well, the disappointing thing is if you're doing like we did, of funding dollars in advance out of years, thinking that there's that money there, and not, you could potentially get into some financial trouble if you thought that, those allocations, those dollars had already been set, and then they weren't. Thank God we didn't,
Go too far.
Yeah.
All right, any further discussion? Seeing none, let's move on to item number 17 under council reports, Transportation Commission. I did hear from Commissioner Kelly. He is not going to make the meeting tonight. He did want to assure us nothing is, yeah, right, earth-shattering, perfect. CDOT, R4 update. I think Josie's still in the house. All righty. None at all?
None at all.
All right.
Unless you guys have specific questions, let me know, but we just gave you some project updates about 3 weeks ago, and not much has changed in that regard.
Super. Thank you. So you just came to eat. Yeah?
I did. She had that
All right, number 19, stack report. That's written. It's page 49 in the packet. Next is, if I can use the acronym, NAPME report. Commissioner Stevens.
So the good news from NAPME is that we are getting closer to getting our application process out. So the idea is that we would have applications start coming in to the NAPME board at the end of September, and that would probably go through the end of the year. This will be for a small grant program. I don't know that the numbers have been determined, but think of, like maybe max at $1 million-ish. I don't think we've actually decided that number yet. But for people, so it has to be communities within the non-attainment area. The criteria includes um, projects that would be proven to reduce ground level ozone. We talked a lot of ozone talk tonight. And special consideration for projects that help DI communities. And eligible entities would be anybody who's eligible for CMAQ dollars would also be eligible for these NAPME funds. So I think that that's an exciting, I mean, we're getting there, like after what, 2.5, 3 years, we're actually gonna get some money out the door. There will be, I think, around $28 million worth of, so there is decent funding, so I would encourage, as those applications come out, for communities to look at those. I mean, what we were thinking with these dollars are kind of sidewalk connector programs, bike paths, any kind of trails. So think multimodal projects that are on the smaller level, but I think that, there's some pretty great opportunities here. With the larger funds, we are likely looking at funding bus rapid transit, although not necessarily, but we've had a lot of including from the NPO, a lot of presentations on bus rapid transit throughout like the Denver area. So, when I think of that, I think, are there possibilities on the 34 corridor that where you could use those dollars? We don't want all the money to obviously go to Denver. And those, the larger grant funds, we're hoping to get out by, I believe, summer or fall of next year. So I guess I would just say keep those dollars in mind as you're thinking about projects that are coming up in your communities, because I think we have a really good opportunity to get some really good funds for those kind of projects. And so if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer those. Or, but anyway,
Commissioner, just a couple real quick, if I could.
Yes.
They get administer those funds through their local agency process. Is there a match requirement on the funds? Or?
That's a good question on the match requirement. I don't know where we landed. We were looking at maybe having a match be sort of commensurate, just like MMOF is, where some communities wouldn't have to pay as much. So I think that, we don't want to discourage people from doing these projects, which are really important. So, but that's a good question, and I can't remember where we landed on that. We still have a couple more months to kind of finish everything up, so I'll ask that question.
Do all that you can to not make sure the project isn't federalized. If it's federalized, then you.
I don't think that will be.
Go through that local agency process.
The applications that we've seen, the draft applications, they look fairly straightforward. They don't look as complicated as any kind of federal application, at least to my, what I'm familiar with. And so, but just stay tuned. And I think, like I said, I think this is a great opportunity to leverage some dollars that you can use in your communities. And I'll find out the answers to your questions, Scott.
Any other questions? Right, item number 21, front range passenger rail. Will is in the house. Tricia may or may not be on the line.
She's not? Oh, okay.
I am online. I'm here, but I'm sorry.
Oh,
my Wi-Fi is really in and out, so hopefully you can hear me.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Sorry, Tricia.
Hi.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so just the district, you probably heard that we're holding off on putting the district on the ballot until
And
2026.
Good teamwork.
We rehearsed this one here. Other than that, we had, it was a not long off-topic conversation. We had a report or an SDP update. I was on vacation. So I asked Tricia to give the report on this. I was there, but didn't really fully understand the SDP update. That was it was a short meeting. That's really all that was in right on this one. So.
Are you keeping the same cadence for meetings, or has it been cut back?
Nope, same. But they just took June, slowed down, but now it's picking back up. So all the committees are meeting, subcommittees are meeting again as well. That's all I have.
Okay, Tricia, if you can hear us, do you have anything else?
Yeah, sorry, my internet is really bad here, so I don't know if you can hear me.
Yeah, we went on without you, so.
Okay.
You got anything else?
No, I will pass and I'll have more for you next month. How's that?
She took really good notes, it's just Wi-Fi.
Thanks for checking in, appreciate it. All right, number 22, host council member report. Councilor Paranto from Johnstown. Did you go by Andrew?
Andrew.
Andy's good? All right, so again, thank you for hosting this.
Yeah, no problem.
Definitely appreciate it. And let us know what's going on in Johnstown.
Oh, well, where to begin? I mean, we're growing like crazy and we expect this going to continue this way for quite some time. As far as particular projects, we did have the century anniversary for the meteorite that landed in Johnstown. And we had a memorial dedicated to it, as well as having a drone show, which was pretty spectacular. So if you guys missed it, we're thinking of doing something like it again in the future.
You didn't put it on YouTube?
It should be on YouTube, actually.
Oh, cool. All right. All right. Anything else?
No.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, this is fantastic. And with that, let's adjourn the meeting. I think we're pretty much on time.
Good job.